but we never would think to look inside.
Mhm.
And inside, within the eye of our hurricane, of our mind, of our thoughts, is this ever present wisdom and insight that we can absolutely count on to guide us to the next moment and the next moment, and to see creatively and insightfully how to change our companies, how to raise our children in the time of a pandemic and homeschooling, for example. So when people don't know how to access that, when people don't know that it's there, and they can absolutely trust their instincts, they're designed for being able to evolve, to transform,
Mhm.
then you're just grasping at straws. So I wrote this book to almost be a handbook for survival with thriving.
Mhm. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Might Help, Can't Hurt, conversations with leaders, doers, and friends. And my leader, doer friend today is Joe Bailey. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Michael, good to see you.
So we've got Joe's impressive biography and stuff all listed, but I think I was trying to remember how we first met, and I know we taught together, but I'm sure we must have met before we taught together.
Well, I think you read "Slowing Down to the Speed of Life."
Definitely.
Mentioned that, and I think we had a conversation
Okay.
about that at one of the conferences or something.
Okay. So we're getting together today in honor of your upcoming new book, Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane, which I just reread in the last 2 days. I read it when you first sent me an early draft, and I think one of the main things that struck me, and I guess this isn't great for sales, but boy, if somebody just got the title, that metaphor, the
Mhm.
eye of the hurricane, this ever-present calm in the very center of massive turbulence and storminess.
Yeah.
I think that would do a world of good for someone.
Yeah, I didn't come up with that title. Actually, my publisher did. But
Well,
unlike many other titles publishers have come up with, I immediately love this because, and the subtitle is Unlocking Resilience in Turbulent Times.
hmm,
Because I think everybody right now, because, and all throughout time, there's been turbulence, there's been change, there's been chaos, there's been calamities and wars and pandemics and all that. But something about this time we're in, because it's so in our face with Facebook, like we're on right now,
yeah.
and with social media and 24-hour cable news, it's so ever conscious in our minds. This hurricane, this tornado that just hit, the seas are rising, climate change, California is burning. Sorry about that. Uh,
At
Lake
the moment, I'm okay.
Lake Tahoe is dropping again. I saw yesterday, and so people have this sense of fear and urgency, and they're looking for something to um, anchor them, to give them guidance, to look to give some stability in their lives. And people look outside in books like yours and mine, and TV shows, and therapists and counselors, but and also to drugs and alcohol and food and success and money and distraction. But we never would think to look inside. And inside, within the eye of our hurricane, of our mind, of our thoughts, is this ever present wisdom and insight that we can absolutely count on to guide us to the next moment and the next moment, and to see creatively and insightfully how to change our companies, how to raise our children in the time of a pandemic and homeschooling, for example. So when people don't know how to access that, when people don't know that it's there, and they can absolutely trust their instincts. They're designed for being able to evolve, to transform.
Mhm.
Then you're just grasping at straws. So I wrote this book to almost be a handbook for survival with thriving
Mm.
in our turbulent times. That it isn't just about keeping your head above water. It's actually
Yeah.
being able to see how to reinvent our lives and our work and save the planet and uh, work together instead of against each other. So
So this happened 3 times in the last week. I told people that I was going to be talking with you and what we were talking about, and they said, "Oh, great! Does he tell you how to find the eye?" And I said, "I don't know, but I'll ask him." So, Joe, there's an eye in the very core of this. There's a calm in the midst of the storm.
yeah.
How do you find it?
Well, I think everybody already has from time to time. You know, that's the good news is that it's not something you have to get or learn about to find. It's already there. It's built into us. And as I look back on my life before I learned the principles, yeah, I had flashbacks of throughout my life when my wisdom, when my insights were knocking on my door telling me, you need to make this vocational shift. You need to major in this topic. You need to leave the seminary and go
Yeah.
into psychology. You need to not marry this person you're going to marry. Yeah, and in hindsight, I could see it was guiding me away from things and towards others. And when I listened to it, magical things happened. And when I didn't listen to it, which is fine too, I had pain, psychological distress. I had anxiety and depression. But as my wife Michael would say in one of her poems, there are no mistakes, only the revelation of the inner self. So every one of the chapters in my book is about that we're designed for transformation and what is that process. So when we hit a wall, when we have a challenge that is beyond us, that we are at our wits' end, we're often by default forced within. And when we kind of give up, we hear that inner, still, small voice of truth. So it's always been there for everyone, but we just not respected it. As Woody Allen would say, uh, I can't remember any club that would allow me to be a member. I wouldn't want to join.
Yeah.
It's like we don't really trust in ourself, and I don't mean our ego self or our personal self, but this impersonal essence of who we are. The true Michael Neill, the true Joe Bailey. That when I met Sydney Banks 40 years ago, I I just in his presence, I felt myself back home to where I felt as a young child,
Mm.
free, creative, secure, uh, and and I had a glimpse of it anyway. And and what he taught me with the principles was how our thinking gets in the way of us. Personal thinking, which is the hurricane,
Yeah.
gets in the way of experiencing that I with an I or EYE
Yeah.
of ourself. And that's what the book is about, is to just help people recognize and be more comfortable trusting who they are to give you the insight that you need for the next step.
Mm.
It doesn't give you the whole thing. It gives you the next step. And from that next step, once you take that step, you trust enough to take that step, it reveals another set of possibilities that
Well,
weren't there before.
one of the metaphors you used within the book, which I really liked, was that in a way, when you get still, it finds you.
Mhm.
You know, you talked about this is a slightly different one, but would you share the story that you tell about when you would take people to the waterfall?
Oh yeah. So earlier on, this was before I learned the principles. I And even during the time since I learned the principles, I've always tried to incorporate wilderness experiences. I've done dog sledding in the North Minnesota winter with Will Steger, the
Right.
Explorer, men's trips. I've done rock climbing adventures out west and on the North Shore of Lake Superior. And one of the times uh, we were up there, one of the guides suggested after a day of climbing, with our muscles are all sore, let's
Yeah.
go to Temperance River, which was just about 20 minutes away. And he said, we in Outward Bound, we would go there and we would hang on the edge of the rock with the waterfall pounding on our back, and it was like a great massage.
Mhm.
So we would made that part of our trip. At the end of a day of climbing, we would go to the Temperance River and walk up to the waterfall and dive in and get under the waterfall and hang onto the rock. But we would tell people ahead of time, um, when you let go of the rock, when you're done getting the massage,
Getting pummeled by the
the,
waterfall. Yeah.
the waterfall will drive you 20 feet under and out about 40 feet down the stream. So you want to hold your breath and trust that you will pop out. Because if you struggle, you'll impede that, but eventually you'll pop out anyway because that's the nature of the current, knows where it's going.
Mm.
And at first, people were very reticent about letting go. They got terrified. What if I drown? All of those fears of water and being out of control, not having control, but trusting in the force of something greater than yourself to
Yeah.
take you where you need to be. And so they would do it, and to a person, they would all say, "Let's do it again tomorrow," because there was a joy with.
Oh, I wanted to come up when I read it. I was like, okay, I don't know where that is, but I'm coming.
Yeah, but that's kind of when you really let go of the ego, you let go of your habitual thinking, and you surrender to the truth of wisdom. It pops you up in circumstances you never would have dreamed of. And your life is a testament to that, Michael. It's a miraculous life of traveling around the world and meeting interesting people, and my own too. It's just, how is this happening? But like I said in a seminar with you, I feel like I'm on a magic carpet and it's taking me, and I'm just trusting it more and more to take me on an adventure to where I'm destined to be.
Mm.
And it's purposeful to my purpose in life. And the more I trust that magic carpet or the waterfall's current, the more I surrender my ego to this deeper intelligence of self,
Mm.
an impersonal self that has, and I talk about this in the book, and the history of science and the history of humanity, that we faced similar times to what we're in now. It's not as publicized on the media
Yeah.
in those days, but it was equally uh, challenging and disastrous. And during those times, people like Isaac Newton and Einstein and others went into the depths of their mind, their universal mind, and made discoveries that transformed and propelled the next generation into the Age of Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, these uh, uh, shifts in consciousness. And we're in that shift of consciousness now.
Mm.
And the missing piece for humanity is understanding the mind and how it actually creates our unique experience of life. And you know this, Michael, this is what your passion is about too.
Mm.
We're here to educate humanity about what helped us first, what we discovered, and to help others see how to transform ourselves, our families, our companies, our societies, our world with wisdom rather than ego, rather than greed, rather than selfishness. That there's an impersonal love and an impersonal intelligence that's really guiding us. The eye of the hurricane is there for all of us. If we But it's hard to go through that wall of the hurricane, the
Yeah.
wall of thought. But planes do it, and they get in there and they see there's this birds are flying around in there, and there's this peaceful
Yeah.
eye. And it takes some some chutzpah, some courage to take that step to go through what's familiar to you, to the unfamiliar of the eye of your wisdom, and give it an ear. This is why people meditate. This is why people go into nature, because their thoughts calm down and they begin to have insights about a career direction or an interpersonal relationship issue. In the stillness of the mind, they they get perspective. We get perspective, and that's what I'm just pointing to through stories. A lot of stories from
Well, yeah, and I'll ask you for a couple of your favorites of the stories, because there are so many amazing stories in the book. But for somebody who's kind of new to this whole conversation,
yeah,
now your first book, I think it was your first book, was called The Serenity Principle.
yeah.
In this book, you talk about the transformation principle. Can you kind of explain what you mean by that? Because what you're sort of pointing people towards, and what I'm pointing people towards in my work, isn't, so there's this great place, go meditate and then you'll be fine. You have a very different way of pointing people.
Yeah, I mean, I think meditation and all yoga and qigong and all these things are wonderful things for people to do. But they work because we're divinely designed to work this way, to adapt, to reinvent, to recreate in response to changing times. Look at nature. Look at how plant life has evolved. Look at how the animal kingdom has evolved. Look at how we've evolved from the caveman days of the ape stage or the monkey stage to where we are now. There's that evolutionary process is this deeper intelligence. And I'll just, one story this is the story that comes to my mind. And it's a kind of a dramatic story. It's a woman who was raising an autistic child. It's in the chapter on parenting and education. And it was every day. She said her son was now 20 years old at the time of the interview, and she said since birth it was like the first 2 years of raising an infant, changing diapers, waking up in the middle of the night, screaming and hollering, and all of there's a lot of attention you have to give that child. It was like having an infant for 20 years. I never knew when the spaghetti would hit the wall during dinner because it wasn't placed on his plate exactly right. With a child with autism. If everything wasn't just right, she didn't know when in the middle of the night he would start screaming and wake her up again. So she would be on alert all night for 20 years, on edge. And she said, and I went to lots of support groups for other autistic parents with autistic children, and they were helpful, but they were like coping mechanisms. They didn't really point me to the peace within. And she said, after I attended a retreat on the 3 principles for parents of autistic children, she said it was like I realized that my angst wasn't coming from my child. It was coming from my thinking of anticipating the next screen, the next interruption, the next event. And in between all those events, there was a peaceful time, but I never lived it because I was always in my thinking. I was in the storm of thought, of apprehension, anticipation, anxiety, and I had no peace. And when I discovered that I was living in a thought-created world, that I had this power to think, and I had this power to be conscious that I was thinking, consciousness, it woke me up from my daymare of being a victim of an autistic child. And she says, I went from living on hell on earth to heaven on earth. My child hasn't changed. It's the same as it was before, but I'm at peace. I'm I'm grateful, and I share this with other autistic parents of autistic children. And so my life has a deeper spiritual meaning now than it ever did before. And I'm not a religious spiritual person, she said, but I feel a connection to that deeper intelligence. So that just that one story illustrates the power of that shift when you realize that your thinking is, or your feelings aren't coming from what you're thinking about, but from how you're thinking in this moment about what you're thinking about. So what you think is what you perceive, and what you perceive is your reality, your personal reality. And when people wake up from that daymare of thought, they experience this deeper eye of the hurricane, this deeper free flow of thought that is responsive and wise and insightful. And that will change an alcoholic who's afraid of relapsing, a drug addict who's having urges to use heroin again. In the moment when they can see that that urge is coming from thought, it settles down the urge, and they stay sober. Mahima, Mahima Shrift from Nepal talked about. That's another story. You go ahead.
Well, no. I mean,
I got to shut up here.
Look, he's got a million of them. But no. But the truth is that in a way, when I was rereading it, and I was finishing it this morning before we spoke, I almost thought, boy, I hope people don't read all these stories and think, it's too miraculous, because they are so miraculous. The shifts, my own shift from, just being sucked out a window, by my mind, it turns out, not a giant vacuum cleaner from hell, but at the time I didn't know that, to realizing that, oh God, I didn't actually want to kill myself. And the whole thing turning on its head 20 plus years later, watching a Sid Banks video and hearing him say, everyone is sitting in the middle of mental health. They just don't know it. And seeing that, like just getting it, like, oh crap, that's true. Those changes were so miraculous in me, even though really what happened wasn't. Like I don't know if I ever told you, but I filmed a television pilot about a decade ago now, based on Supercoach, when the book Supercoach.
Really? I don't know.
Yeah, and it was one of the producers from Dr. Phil, and they brought in all these people for me to work with, and it was going great because people were having all these amazing insights and experiences, and the before and after were really dramatic. But I realized it wasn't going to make it as a TV show when one day the producer came in and said, I can't see the join. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I can see the before and I can see the after, but nothing happened. And that's the truth of it in my experience. Nothing happens, but everything's different. Everything changes when you see what's really going on. And I just, I'm, I guess 14 years in now to this conversation, haven't gotten bored. You've got to be like 35, 40 years.
40, yeah.
And I think that's one of the other things that's amazing about it is you don't burn out on it, because they're going to burn out. It's so cool.
Well, and also, Michael, I still, seeing this doesn't mean you're living in bliss 24/7. I still am affected and get lost in my thinking almost every day, reacting to a news story or something my wife said or didn't say, or I think she's thinking about me or whatever. I can get caught in the illusion, what the Eastern philosophers would call the grand illusion of thought, because thought is so tricky. It turns instantly into perception. And so it's easy to forget that you're creating it. It looks like she's making me feel this way, or that's making me feel this way, or the weather is, or the car breaking down. Um, and and when you have for me, it's like having a GPS. I love to travel in the wilderness in Canada and northern Minnesota by canoe, and it all looks the same. Every lake looks the same, and you never know where the portages are. So you have a map, but you also have a compass or a GPS that lets you know what your direction is, so you can know where you are in relationship to where you want to be. And so we have that. The principles are just describe how the system works, but the compass is in us. The GPS is within us. It's our instinctual, intuitive gut knowing that is we've all experienced, but we've not respected it enough. We've dismissed it over intellectual knowledge, over what experts tell us. And so when you get an aha moment, like that woman with the autistic child, and you realize where your experience is coming from, it doesn't look like anything happened, because nothing changed other than everything changed by how you see it.
Yeah.
And so your experience, when we've worked, like with Mahima's story, who was in charge of emergency preparedness in Nepal when the earthquake hit a few years ago, when she had this understanding and an insight about it in the middle of the earthquake, something she learned in the seminar online, that we're living in the feeling of our thinking always, hit her like another psychological earthquake. And she realized that her fear wasn't coming from the earthquake, it was coming from anticipating the next and the next. And that allowed her to remain calm in the midst of a real tragedy and crisis, so she could see clearly how to help others, how to go to safety. And she taught that to all the aid workers, and it allowed them to have more resilience, to stay in the field longer. And I've worked with fire departments and police departments teaching the same things, and it allows the officers to stay calm in a life and death situation and make the right call, make the right decision to save a life. So it doesn't look like anything's happening, but it's incredibly powerful. I imagine, like, describing quantum physics or smashing an atom to a layperson like me seems, well, I don't have any idea what they're talking about, but I sure like the electricity that comes from the nuclear plant.
Yes. Let me ask you something, because one of the things that you mentioned is that we come to see that, oh gosh, we're creating it, like it's being created from our own thinking. Now, I know that one of the places people go with that is, well, then how do I change my thinking?
Yeah.
And there's even a sort of a level of guilt and stress that I see in people when they think, oh my God, it's even worse than I thought. I'm doing it to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you address that with people, so that it doesn't start to seem like a new burden?
Well, I felt that burden when I first learned it. I thought, oh God, I don't get the principles. What's the matter with me? I'm all caught up in my anxiety again, or I'm angry, or I'm worried, and I didn't. What insight helped me was, number one, seeing that there are no mistakes, only the revelation of the inner self. So whenever I am caught up, it's helping me see another blind spot in my habitual thinking that I could not see innocently. And when I hit that wall, that relapse into old habitual thinking, it was purposeful for me to have a deeper insight about that blind spot. So that's how transformation is an ongoing evolutionary process. So when the more when I work with alcoholics and addicts, because they're so full of shame and guilt and embarrassment and all that, I say, don't feel bad about relapse. We all relapse all the time into old thinking. That's part of being a human being. And every time you fall back into old thinking, it's just someone tapping on your shoulder to make you more awake to that invisible thought, perception, reality. And so I now, every time I get caught up in my thinking now, I might feel bad a little bit, but mostly I'm like, oh, what am I going to learn this time?
Yeah.
What's in store for me here? And so it becomes more of an adventure when you're lost in the wilderness. How am I going to really find my way this time?
Yeah.
This is cool. I love getting lost.
Yeah.
This is a challenge.
I don't know if you've seen Squid Games.
No.
It's the big show on Netflix right now, and it's from South Korea, and it's incredibly violent. I'm loving it. But there's this moment where there's this horrific life or death tug of war in one of the episodes where literally the team that loses are gonna be dead.
Oh my God.
And you know, one of our heroes is being pulled off the thing, and then it just cuts to black, and that's the end of the episode. And Clara and I screamed like when we were watching it last night, and then and like couldn't wait to see what was gonna happen next.
Yeah.
And when you were saying that, that's what it reminds me of in my own experience, is that, yeah, I get caught up. It starts to look like these, you know, it's all real, and this is, you know, this is a little bit different because, and all that. But there is this growing sense in me of, I can't wait to see what happens this time.
Yeah.
Like, I can't wait for the next episode.
Yeah.
Because I know something's happening. I know it's not over.
Yeah.
Right. I know the story goes on.
Yeah.
I know the hero makes it.
Sure.
Right. So there is. It's a very different feeling.
Yeah. When you understand how the system is designed to be in service of you, to evolve consciousness. We're designed to evolve in consciousness, in our spiritual awareness, in our happiness level, our joy, our ability to be creative and solve problems. We keep evolving in that. But in order to evolve, it's almost like there has to be a resistance, a challenge to kind of, what it does is it humbles me to realize I don't know everything I need to know. I have to go back inside and awaken more deeply. And every time I have that, I go quiet. I just, before I did this, I just took a moment and just asked, you know, what is it that I need for this show today? And in that quiet, all this stuff started just bubbling. But I didn't, most of my life I didn't, or half of my life I didn't know to look there. I was looking in the latest self-help book, or in calling my Al-Anon friend, you know, what should I do now, or sponsor. I didn't know that the answer is within. The secret is within. The GPS is within. The guidance system is within, and that's what thriving in the eye of the hurricane is really the essence of it. Is trusting that within this turmoil of our time, we are being forced to evolve to a higher level of consciousness, so we as a humanity can work together instead of against. And it doesn't look so good right now. It can look really dicey at the level of division. And my next podcast is about seeing beyond our differences. And Mavis is I'm going to talk to her and Judy Sedgman and a police officer from California, how they've all faced working with diverse audiences and people they're working with, because we have to learn how to come together, because to survive as a democracy, to survive as a country, to survive as a planet, we have to come together. Like the pandemic is the perfect, if I was God, I would have thrown this virus in here. We got to help the world see how they all have to work together to solve this. It's like a problem solve that makes you learn a bigger lesson. You can't just get rid of the virus in one country, because it's just going to mutate and come back on you if you don't help everybody else, like in South Africa or wherever. So it's like a perfectly designed problem for global cooperation. And so there's all of these hidden um, challenging situations that have a surprise inside. That is an evolutionary leap, whether it's on the individual level, the familial level, the relationship level, the company level, the town level, the country, United Nations level, all of these. This is really big. This understanding is really, really big, Michael, and you know that. That's why you do what you do. That human beings need to learn to keep their psychological bearings in the eye of the hurricane for us to come together to create solutions to the vast problems that we face.
It's one of the reasons I love that waterfall metaphor. It is because getting caught up, it seems to me, whether at the personal level or the global level, is that moment of getting sucked under 20 feet under by the water. Once you know you're going to pop up downstream, you can't wait to kind of do it again.
Yeah.
It's not like you want to never go through that again. Thank God we survived that one. It's like, can we do it tomorrow, Dad?
Yeah.
Right? And there is an element that once, this is where I see the hope as so much part of the power of this understanding, is that once you see that it really, yes, you'll get sucked back down, but yeah, you'll come back up. It's kind of fun. It's kind of part of the ride, part of the adventure. I want to finish with the question that I finish with on every episode, which is I briefly make you emperor of the entire universe. Now, you've already said if you were God, you'd give everyone COVID. But as emperor of the universe, what would be your first decree if you were in charge of everything and everyone?
Wow. I don't know. This is just. I'm an old Beatles fan. It just what came into my mind. I don't know why, but all you need is love. Um, the lyric of that song, that feeling of love, unconditional love,
Mm.
is one of the byproducts of the eye of the hurricane. That when you're in connection, in awareness of that center within each of you, you can't help but feel love for yourself and see your own innocence and compassion for yourself. And when you see that for yourself, you can't help but forgive others and see their innocence and love them. So that's the solution, really. I mean, it sounds so trite and so all you need is love, da, 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 da. But it's true. Wonderful lyrics come from the muse out of people to transform humanity. Music is transformational. Public speaking is transformational. And when things come through us that are true, it helps us move up a little bit. And we're just moving up a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. But this is a time of greatness. This is a time that has to bring out the worst of people and the greatness of people. But the greatness of people will be the lead. That will be people will follow greatness over hate and over fear, because we intuitively know remember the old E.F. Hutton ads on TV? Yeah, it was selling insurance or something. I don't remember what financial advice. And E.F. Hutton was the quiet guy sitting in the corner. Everybody turns to him because he's the wise person. What would E.F. Hutton say?
There's a hush falls over the room, and everybody's like,
Yeah. And it's like when I've worked with leaders in corporations, as they speak from wisdom, as they are calmer and more in their mental health, they're in the middle of a crisis meeting. They're the best listener in the room. They're the quiet voice. And people will always turn to them and say, well, what do you think? And I remember the CEO of Mayo I was working with, coaching him, and they were in this huge crisis about the child care center and the hospital, and they removed it because it was too costly, and the women were all up in arms and weren't going to quit, the doctors and the nurses. And so he was mediating this, and he just listened to all of their anger and listened to all of their frustration. And then in the end, he kind of summarized it all. And there was a hush in the room, and it was just like, wow, why didn't we think of that? I mean, it was such a simple, obvious solution, because it wasn't coming from him being defensive or reactive, but from listening deeply.
Yeah.
And then within came this moment of clarity of the solution to the issue of the day. But multiply that by billions. And if people came from that, we would be evolving more rapidly.
Well, thank you, Joe. I can't wait to hold the real thriving in the eye of the hurricane in my hand.
Me too.
But in the meantime, it's been an absolute delight.
I just have the printout.
Yeah, I know. I can't even do the holding it up stuff. But at least you'll recognize the author photo.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for all your help, for not only me, but for so many others.
Thank you.
Having just spent the last week with two of your top students, I see the effects of your work.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I really hope you enjoyed today's show. You can learn more at michaelneill.org. Please go over to iTunes to subscribe and rate the podcast. Until next time, have fun, learn heaps, and I'll talk with you soon.